The community of Reiger Park in Boksburg is reeling after 6 people were gunned down in a drive-by shooting last night. Police are promising to keep patrolling the area, and there are plans to tackle the drug problem in that area. ActionSA's Ekurhuleni Chief Whip Michael Basch continues to join us now for more. Thank you so much, Michael, for your time this evening. So we did see last night those members of the community being brutally gunned down. What, in your view, as ActionSA, do you think has now increased the spike of such attacks in communities such as Westbury and now in Reiger Park?
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on, and good evening to all your viewers. You know, as ActionSA, especially with our new incoming mayoral candidate, Ekurhuleni motto, tackling drugs and tackling gangsterism is something that is very much on the forefront of our agenda at this point in time. I think what we're seeing happening is a bit of a breakdown between the communication between bodies like community policing forums and SAPS itself, with community policing forums being such a vital part of the policing chain. Having community members out there being the eyes and ears, but being completely under-resourced at this point in time. And that is creating this gap where a lot of this criminality is coming into space. And I think also if we look at it, when we look at the spending from a provincial point of view and a national point of view, where we have a look at the so-called traffic wardens that were established and now disbanded, and how much money was spent on that could have gone into capacitating our local SAPS units, but also going into capacitating things like the community policing forums, which are so vital to be able to be the eyes and ears. They can be able to point out where a lot of these challenges start long before they become what happened last night, which was really a complete failure of intelligence and a terrible loss and an absolute tragedy to those families.
I mean, you speak about a breakdown between CPF and SAPS and the role that the wardens would have played in a situation such as this. What do you think led to that breakdown, and how do you see the role of the crime wardens, especially at a local level where they're able to patrol and bring in that intelligence that you speak of that could have prevented an event such as that of last night?
Well, I think when you look at the wardens specifically, I mean, the way they were deployed in that and the way that they were equipped, they weren't really law enforcement at the end of the day. So I really felt that budget could have been spent so much better in capacitating local units on the ground. We have so many stations where we go out and we hear the complaints that they don't have vehicles available, or the officers don't have, you know, the tools of trade that they require. So when you're looking at 500 million, which, you know, could have escalated by now, surely that could have been better spent. And then, like I say, the community policing forums, these are civilians who live in those communities. They know those streets. They know exactly what is going on. It's being able to take that intelligence from them and make that into actionable steps and actually go after these gangsters right where they are in those communities. Because it's not like it's a trade secret at this point. Certainly, Ekurhuleni was out at the scene last night. And from the reports that I got from him, it was quite disturbing to know that, you know, there were reports from communities saying that the police were right there when it happened. And yet, you know, not much materialized in that moment in time. It's almost as if they were frozen in space. So if we have these situations where police are available or they're there, but there's no action taking, or we have a situation of they're not acting on the information that's been given to them, but we're going to be seeing more and more sort of instances like this until we start seeing a police force that is capacitated, that is trained well enough to be able to deal with this type of violence that we're seeing in these communities.
Well, the police commissioner, the National Police Commissioner General Fani Masimula was on the scene, and he made a few promises, but he also spoke about looking into long-term solutions for events such as these. And he said it's not going to be the police alone, but this needs to be a collaboration between multi-departments such as education and social development. Do you think sufficient efforts have been put in the past for places such as Ekurhuleni to start seeing a decline of such activities?
I wish I could say that there has been, but certainly there hasn't been. And yes, I was there today when he was when he was there, and we certainly heard what he said. But I think there's a couple of things that he's also just not putting into or not discussing, and that is forensics. If we look at the massive backlog that we have in forensics, so there are cases where people are being caught, firearms are being confiscated, but those cases can drag on for 2 years before they even see the inside of a courtroom, because we have this huge backlog on forensics. So I do agree, education is a hugely important role, is being able to get to these youngsters while they're still at school, being able to create opportunities for them when they leave school, so that this gangsterist lifestyle isn't the only option that is available to them, which we see in this economy all too often, that these youngsters finish school, they don't know what they're going to do for themselves. There isn't enough of a market to absorb them into it. And unfortunately, this seems to be the only viable option for them. So certainly education is on that. Social services, being able to go out there. And one of the things that is sorely lacking, certainly within Ekurhuleni, is drug rehabilitation programs, is having places of safety for these youngsters to go to get the assistance, to get them off of that drug lifestyle. We just do not have enough of that happening at this moment in time. But like I say, forensics certainly is going to be a huge thing. We know with Kalani, one of you in his opening sort of speech when he accepted the mayoral candidacy was very clear to say that when he becomes the mayor, that he's going to now bring EMPD into this as well and create specialized units, but also use technology like gunshot locating technology so that there are early warning systems, especially in an area like Reiger Park, where this unfortunately happens more often than not. It is a large problem within that community. So if we had this early warning detection system, we'd be able to get to these problems faster, apprehend these problems faster. But then, like I say, bringing in that community policing forum, making it a complete cycle. So yes, I agree, education is absolutely vital, opportunity is vital, but drug rehabilitation is also, without which we cannot get them out of the cycle. But it goes back to, what do we do when we catch them? If we do not have our forensics up and running the way that they're supposed to do, a lot of times it gives these guys the opportunity to bribe officials, to have case files go missing, and then it just falls through the cracks. So that would be our stance as ActionSA, is to say we need to look at the complete cycle of the issue, not just a reactionary point of view, but a sort of proactive viewpoint on this issue.
Following the Madlanga Commission, we are seeing how there are organized cartels that deal in drugs, which then filters down to syndicates, and therefore then filtering down to gangsters in communities. Are we having a clearer picture of the linkages of what really happens at the top and how it's trickling down and affecting the everyday you and I on the ground?
Oh, absolutely. I think what's happening at that commission is absolutely fantastic. It's a long time coming that we actually started to hear, how those, as you say, the linkages up to the top, how those connected individuals are able to operate within communities. All too often, a lot of attention is spent, and rightly so, to the street dealer. This is the person who's on the ground who's earning the least amount of money out of the entire chain. Unfortunately, is generally where the most amount of violence happens. But we need to start following the money and start saying, how does this product get into South Africa? Not all of it is produced here. And certainly we're now finding a lot more drug labs. So there is a fair amount of production that is now happening in our space here. But that requires knowledge and experience. And these are cartel-based things. So it really, when we look at what's coming out of that commission, we start to wonder just how much of a gangsterist state South Africa has become. And it's become that because those at the top have been able to operate with impunity because they have these type of political connections and they have these relationships with top SAPS officials. And it can only embolden the man on the street. If my boss can get away with it, I've got him to cover me up. Me pulling the trigger has very little consequence. And then when we look at what's happening within our prison system, in terms of the freedoms and the rights that some of these gangsters, when they go to prison, get to enjoy. And a lot of times we hear testimony coming from people saying, well, these guys live better on the inside than what they do on the outside. So it's not really a deterrent for them. They know they're going to be well looked after when they go behind bars, access to TV, access to education, access to internet. Whereas on the street, they're hustling for their very lives.
I mean, what strategies then should we look at, Michael, in order to really curb some of these activities that are happening on the ground? You spoke about having drug rehab programs, tightening up and enhancing our CPF. But what are some of the low-hanging fruit that you think we should be looking at in order for us to start having some momentum in ensuring that these activities don't occur?
Well, I would go back to really enhancing the role of community policing forums within the cycle, is equipping them and training them and capacitating them better, because they really are, like I say, the frontline information system, because these are people that live in those neighborhoods, because they know the streets, they know the people there. They are able to identify these problems. But I would say second to that is we really have to take corruption within the force seriously. They are, and today we heard it more than once, of community members saying and complaining about these close relationships between SAP's members and some of these drug dealers and drug lords. These are fundamentally basic things that we need, that, as you say, low-hanging fruit, that if we start with that, we start going to have a huge impact. We need to be tough on crime. We need to be tough on corruption, irrespective of whether you're the man, whether you're the drug dealer on the streets, or whether you're the officer wearing the badge. Bad is bad. And we need to draw a line in the sand and say, so far, no further.
All right, Michael Basch, thank you so much for your time. This certainly is a cause for concern. I mean, we're even seeing children that are being grazed by bullets during these activities. It certainly is a time for all communities to stand up and start protecting each other. Thank you for your time. That was the ActionSA Ekurhuleni Chief Whip, Michael Basch.